Quiet as it's kept, many of us relate to God through the same nervous system we developed around fathers and pastors and husbands and boyfriends and male authority figures and patriarchal institutions. Basically, when the men in your life, whether they were men as lovers, men as fathers, men as uncles, brothers, or friends, when the men in your life have lied to you, abandoned you, controlled you, disappointed you, frightened you, demanded your loyalty, and then society blames you for what they did, what then happens when the most powerful being in existence is introduced to you as another he? You talk to him, you pray to him, you worship him. But what happens when the God you were taught to call he becomes entangled with every man who has ever disappointed you, abandoned you, or said, just trust me? Sometimes our experiences with men shape our very understanding of God. Sometimes they shape how we distrust God. Sometimes they shape how we depend on God. And if I'm honest, sometimes they even shape how we struggle with God. Oh, nobody else struggles with God? Just me? Okay, fine, girl. And I can hear some of y'all now talking about, I don't see God as a literal man. Maybe consciously you don't. But language creates imagery. And when God is repeatedly called he and father and king and Lord, the mind does not receive those words as neutral. Those words carry gender. They create shape and voice and posture and even our understanding of things like authority and presence. So even if you intellectually believe that God is a spirit and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth, even if you claim to believe that God is beyond gender, your imagination might still reach for a man. What we repeatedly call something affects how we picture it, and how we picture it affects how we relate to it. This is what came to my mind when I saw that Teddy Campbell had filed for divorce from Tina Campbell after more than 25 years of marriage. Now I know, I'm late. Teddy filed that paperwork nearly 3 months ago, which is approximately 47,332 years on the internet calendar. But I don't make videos simply because the topic is trending. And I knew when it first popped off that I wanted to talk about this. I just didn't know how I wanted to frame it until the angle hit me earlier this week. And the angle is this. Man cheats on his wife. She stays. She forgives him. They rebuild the marriage. And their restoration becomes evidence that God is real, that prayer works, and that forgiveness can save a family. Then years later, he files for divorce. He files for divorce. Initially, I thought this video was about people struggling with God because they struggle with men. But the more I sat with it, I realized it was way deeper than that. This is also about what happens when an earthly he wounds you and a heavenly he tells you what to do with the wound. So a man hurts you, then you are told to turn to him, capital H. A man betrays you, then the higher him gives you the strength to forgive. So the cure don't take you outside of the structure. It sends you further inside of it. The problem is human male power, and the answer is perfect male power. The earthly man failed, and then the heavenly man will not. The husband betrayed you. God becomes the better husband. The father abandoned you. God becomes the perfect father. The man didn't protect you. God becomes the ultimate protector. So basically, the same architecture that wounded you is the architecture you are told will heal you. And that's the question underneath Tina and Teddy Campbell's divorce. Well, that is my question underneath Tina and Teddy Campbell's divorce. Now, I'm going to try to unpack this with care and precision. But before I begin, who can tell me what percentage of an iceberg is above water? Yep, roughly 10%. So that means there is 90% that we can't see. Insert what took the damn Titanic clean up out of here. So first, we're going to stay on the surface with what most people are talking about. And it's easy to say and stop at things like, she should have left him the first time. She wasted all them years on that man. This why you don't forgive a cheater. We heard it all. But that's 10% of the iceberg that we can see. I want to talk about the other 90% that we cannot. Mind you, this conversation really ain't about Tina Campbell for real. Matter of fact, it's not only about cheating. It's about how women, and in this case, especially straight Black Christian women, are often taught to process male harm through a male-coded God. And to many of us, straight Black or otherwise, whether we admit it or not, God is a man. Father, he, king, Lord, master, provider, protector, judge, the ultimate authority. Quiet as it's kept, many of us relate to God through the same nervous system we developed around fathers and pastors and husbands and boyfriends and male authority figures and patriarchal institutions. Basically, when the men in your life, whether they were men as lovers, men as fathers, men as uncles, brothers, or friends, when the men in your life have lied to you, abandoned you, controlled you, disappointed you, frightened you, demanded your loyalty, and then society blames you for what they did, what then happens when the most powerful being in existence is introduced to you as another he? It makes me wonder how much of our relationship with God is actually our relationship with male power. Let's talk about what's really feeding all this. So join me as I perform a cultural autopsy. Welcome back to the dissection table. I'm the Ignant intellectual. My birth certificate says Zarandrian. I'm a writer, a storyteller, and a masterful facilitator. This is a space where we think about our thoughts. It's also an online home for thinkers. Like I said, today we are performing a cultural autopsy on God. In a cultural autopsy, I do what autopsies do. I dissect. I take something familiar, I open it up, and I examine the beliefs, the systems, the incentives, and the assumptions that are hiding in plain sight. And in every cultural autopsy, there's a body on the table. And today's body is God. Now, let me be clear. In this video, we are not asking whether God is literally male. We are asking what happens when our emotional picture of God has been built through male language, male authority, male disappointment, male protection, and male power. When the same structure that wounds women is also presented as the structure that heals them. As we can see with Tina Campbell and a host of other women, some people do not run from God after men hurt them. Some people run deeper into God. And that may be very sincere. That may even be sacred. It may also be survival. But it's still worth asking, what kind of God are they running towards? And whose image shaped that God? But before we go any further, this channel is an online home for thinkers. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here so that together we can think about our thoughts and why we think them. And I already know this autopsy probably gonna hit a nerve for a lot of people, especially if you've built part of your entire identity around your relationship with God. And you know God for yourself. And God has provided for you late in the midnight hour and turned it around. And God is your wheel in the middle of a wheel. You may find yourself feeling some things with this cultural autopsy. You are welcome to disagree with me, but we have two very short and sweet rules of engagement. Rule number one, no drive-by disagreements. You can't watch 3 minutes of a 20-minute plus, maybe an hour, I don't know how long this is going to take, dissection and act like you've seen the entire body. You got to watch the full dissection before you draw these solid conclusions. Most of the time, the things you're mad at is something I've wrestled with by the 15 to 20 to 40-minute mark. So you have to watch the full dissection. Rule number two, audit your own thoughts. If you have a thought, cool. But if you have not thought about why you have that thought, shh. So don't you dare click off this video, because once we start the dissection, you might actually think about this omniscient and omnipresent wheel in the middle of a wheel very differently. All right, now let's talk about how God being portrayed as a man might have us messed up a little. First of all, I got to make something abundantly clear. Teddy Campbell chose to cheat. He chose to cheat. The church did not unzip his pants. Patriarchy did not send him scandalous text messages. A male image of God didn't force him into another woman's bed. He was a grown man who made choices that violated the agreement he had with his wife. Because I ain't about to get on this camera and be somebody else who uses culture and religion and childhood wounds and masculinity or fancy theology to soften this man's responsibility. I have seen it a million times. It's one of the quickest ways women end up shouldering a man's betrayal when everybody starts explaining him. He was insecure. She neglected him. You know, she'd always singing with Mary. The enemy attacked their marriage. She do seem like she kind of difficult. She was working too much. She probably wasn't meeting that man's needs. No, he chose to put his eggplant inside another woman's happy place. And to be honest, from Tina's all public comments, she eventually began examining the ways that she believed that she contributed to the problems inside her marriage. Go ahead, Tina. Accountability, baby. That is real cute. And honestly, I'm all for accountability. I actually wish more people were reflective in the way that Tina was. And problems in a marriage and the choice to betray a marriage ain't the same thing. Two people can very much so contribute to an unhealthy relationship, but only the person who cheats is responsible for cheating, as long as we got that straight. So let's not have one of those conversations where we redistribute that responsibility somewhere else. It falls squarely on the shoulders of Teddy Campbell. But what I do want to do is spend some time examining what happened after he cheated. What meanings became attached to Tina choosing to stay in her marriage? What does her forgiveness now mean? What did the restoration come to mean? Did the restoration fail? What about her endurance said, let's make this a spiritual lesson? Because honestly, the way I see it, people are now treating the divorce as proof that that lady forgiveness failed. See, I told you she should have never taken him back. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Because I'm wondering what kind of God is operating underneath all these interpretations. Honestly, sometimes, now I don't know, but if you like me, you have believed that you have had a problem with God. But as I've dug deeper into this whole God-human relationship, I've learned that what we sometimes actually have a problem with is power. Specifically, male power and unpredictable power. Sometimes power that demands that we trust before it has proven itself trustworthy. And sometimes that power can hurt you, then require you to forgive. and power that remains in charge even after it fails you. And then religion turns around and gives that power to a male voice, a male face, male pronouns. Girl, that's a lot. And we already talked about how words create imagery. And no matter how much you think that you are not impacted by them and can manage to not think of God as a man, although male God is all up, over, round, and through religion. Let's get back to the 10% of this iceberg we can see. We have the first layer of what we can see. And that is that Tina and Teddy Campbell got married in 2000. And years into the marriage, Tina learned that Teddy had been unfaithful. And she described the betrayal publicly. She spoke about the devastation. She spoke about her rage. She spoke about the pain she felt. And she also spoke about the process of forgiveness. They stayed together. And over time, they began to publicly speak about the healing of their marriage. I've watched them on Dear Future Wifey podcast. I watched them on some TBN specials talking about the healing of their marriage. Their story legit became a testimony. It became a story about what prayer can do, what forgiveness could do, and what, faith can do. They've often talked about Hebrews 11:1, what God could restore. But I ain't gonna lie. In my opinion, a lot of that was her trying to convince herself and us. It was given, speak those things that are not as if they were. I understand. Who the hell am I? A random person on the internet. Then, according to the divorce filings, they separated in June 2024. And in April 2026, Teddy filed for divorce. He filed for divorce after cheating on that lady. And then the public is going back and forth through the entire archive. Child, they done dug up these people's interviews, their testimonies, their prayers, the declarations, YouTube shorts, the smiling photographs, the conversations about restoration, what God can do because nothing is too much for my God. Baby, the people have dug up Tina and Teddy's receipts. And they're also asking whether Tina should have stayed. But I think a more important question is, why do we need her staying to prove anything in the first place? Why did the continuation of that marriage become evident that God is good? Just God couldn't be good if they had got a divorce? Why did forgiveness have to result in continued marriage anyway, in order for it to count or be valid? Why did her ability to remain connected to the man who betrayed her become something for the public to celebrate? And I know a lot of y'all was sitting back there watching the whole thing unfold, knowing it would end in divorce. Because I can hear somebody now, not me. I always knew it wasn't going to last. Niggas. But why now that the marriage is ended, are some people treating a divorce as if it reaches backwards through time and invalidates every decision that lady ever made? This is the visible problem. This is the 10% of the iceberg that we can see. A marriage survived infidelity and later ended in divorce. But directly underneath that is a much larger spiritual question. What do we believe that God requires from women after men harm them? And even deeper than that, why is God so often the authority women are told to consult after male harm? Why is the earthly he allowed to create the womb, while the heavenly he becomes the one who decides what forgiveness, healing, restoration, and obedience is supposed to look like? That's the loop. That's the loop I want us to keep watching. Then the next layer of this iceberg is something I'm going to call forgiveness has been fused with continued access. One of the first things feeding this conversation is the way Christian culture often collapses forgiveness, reconciliation, and restoration into one thing. Meanwhile, they're not the same. Forgiveness don't automatically mean reconciliation. I can forgive you and not desire to get back with you. And then reconciliation don't automatically mean renewed trust. I can choose to get back with you, but that don't mean I trust you. And then renewed trust don't mean I automatically want to continue the marriage. I can trust you and still choose to end the marriage. And the decision for a woman to release herself from consuming rage does not require her to restore someone's access to her body, her home, her money, her children, her future. But many people out here are taught that real forgiveness leaves the door wide the fuck open. I know I'm talking about God, but I'm going to still be cussing in this video because God understands my heart. But many people out here are taught that forgiveness leaves the door wide open. If you forgive him, why you don't want to speak to him? I thought you said you forgave him. Why he can't come home? If you forgave him, why you still divorcing him? I thought you forgave him. Now you talk about all these boundaries. I thought you said you forgave that man. Basically, y'all saying, if you forgave him, why are there still consequences? And that's crazy to me. Because post-forgiveness is where the real consequences come. Because a lot of people think that consequences are proof that forgiveness failed. But really, consequences are proof that something happened. Again, a lot of people think consequences is proof that something failed. When in reality, consequences are simply proof that something happened. But women, especially Christian women, they be pressured to prove that their forgiveness is real by making themselves available again. It's like when the man confesses, the woman forgives, the marriage is restored, and everybody praises the Lord. But notice the architecture. A man caused the rupture, but a male-coded God becomes the pathway back to order. The man's betrayal created the whole crisis. Flip the house upside down. The heavenly Father then becomes the one who gives the woman strength to absorb, interpret, forgive, and rebuild after the crisis. The cause is the cure. Okay, let me be less lazy with my language. The cause is not exactly the cure in a one-to-one direct relationship, but the cure is built from the same architecture. The cause is cure light. And by that I mean male authority harms and a higher male authority heals. And a woman is placed between them trying to survive one he by obeying another he. I have personally witnessed this in my own life, how for Black women, forgiveness can carry a whole nother assignment. I have witnessed friends and cousins and aunties be expected to consider what a Black man is already facing in the world before they decide how fully he should face what he has done inside the home. I have heard Black people tell Black women, don't tear down a Black man. Society does that enough for him. Don't embarrass him publicly. Girl, don't feed into the stereotypes. And this the one that get me. Are you really going to let one little mistake destroy his family, destroy his ministry? That man got a career. To hell with her family and her career and her future. It's all about his. So not only is she being asked to forgive her husband, she might also be asked to protect Black manhood from the consequences of one Black man's choices. Notice how much of the visible proof rests on what the woman is willing to reopen. Is she her heart, her home, her body, her trust, her whole public reputation, her future? Earlier, I talked about Tina and Teddy's story becoming a testimony. Once they started speaking publicly about this whole healing of their marriage, when it comes to this whole access thing, the way I see it is the man's repentance might start the story, but it's really the woman's renewed availability that completes the testimony. Tina was expected to forgive Teddy. Full stop. And that is a problem. But really, before we even get into God real good, we need to understand family as a system. Because this conversation is not about one isolated marriage or simply two individual people. It's about a whole ass system. A system that teaches men that they will be forgiven. And a system that teaches women that they will forgive. So before I move on, what is a system? A system is a group of interacting, interrelated, and interdependent elements that form this complex whole. It's like a group of things that work together interdependently. They're connected and they need each other to operate. One of the most famous systems is the digestive system. The digestive system has an esophagus, it has a stomach, it includes the gallbladder, the small intestine, the large intestine, the rectum, and the anus. And systems are ordered in the sense of you eat before you shit, to be crass. Cars are also a system. They're specifically a mechanical system. The engine, the brakes, the fuel line, the tires, every part is different, but they interrelated because they need each other to create the whole system. If you remove one crucial element, the whole car stops. Or worse, the car might still move, but now the whole thing is unsafe. A lot of us know about that type of car. A car don't really need an air conditioner. Like I said this before in the video, my mama been driving around Atlanta, Georgia with no air for probably 5 years, easily by now. But that transmission, that engine, that's a crucial element to a car. And that's what makes a system like family deceptively durable. It doesn't need all parts to function, just enough to look like it's still working. One of the most overlooked systems that most of us engage every day is the system of family. It's also one of the first full-fledged systems that we experience. And if we're going to talk about God and marriage and religion and infidelity, we can't skip the family because the family itself is a system, one of the first we ever experienced. And like all systems, it has interrelated parts with one common goal of keeping the family together. And so what that looks like in reality is the friend who thinks she is given sound advice by saying, friend, don't make no sudden decisions. It's the pastor who says, don't let the devil win, beloved. Don't destroy the testimony. It's the mother who from her own pain of the father cheating on her says, protect my grandbabies, protect them children. Don't embarrass that man. Now, I couldn't find no information overtly stating that Tina's mama, Honey, was cheated on by her father, Tommy. But I do know for a fact that Tina's parents, Tommy and Honey, divorced and remarried each other 3 times.
We stuck together because the last message that my dad told me, he said, the reason it was 3 times is because I kept trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
He said, I kept trying to make it work.
Yeah.
He said, he was like, for some reason, me and your mom, our communication didn't work. He said, but I love her and she loved me.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept coming back because my family was what I wanted.
Yeah.
You see, when it comes to family, we look at family as just my mama, just my daddy, just my cousins, just my grandma. But everybody plays a role in the system of family. System, not just individual people. Just like the digestive system is a system, just like a car is a system, the family is a system. Everybody has and plays a role. Everyone adjusts to keep the system from breaking, even if it means breaking the Black woman who was cheated on and publicly humiliated. And when one part of that system is disrupted, The whole system start trying to regain balance. And again, that's what people start talking about. Don't leave, protect the children, consider that man's career. That is the way of regaining balance. So when a man cheats, he not only betrays his wife, he destabilizes the system. The marriage is disrupted, the children are affected, the family image is threatened, the church story is threatened, that public testimony goes to shit. The future everyone thought they understood, the very future is threatened. And once that happened, the system often becomes more invested in restoring stability than telling the truth. Then we start seeing the denial and the victim blaming and stabilizers. That stuff like, well, he only made one little mistake. Well, you do what Tina Campbell do work a lot, or black women in general. Y'all do work a lot. She is on the road a lot. You know that certain women can't be trusted anyway. And then we have silence as protection. You're gonna mess up his life. What will the church think? What will this one think? Keep your family together. Protect the children. Don't throw away all those years. Everybody and their mama in the family system wants the system to go back to normal. Sometimes normal is really just a place where the truth had to be swallowed so that the structure could survive. It was never normal anyway. And a woman's forgiveness is not only about her heart. Her forgiveness becomes where the family completely reorganizes itself. That is bonkers to me. She didn't cheat, but her forgiveness of cheating weighs that much? If she forgives, the family can keep going. If she forgives, the marriage can be restored. If she forgives, the children can have their image of home. And if she forgives, the church can celebrate that testimony. But if she don't reopen access, if she says, I forgive you, but I'm not staying, now the system has a problem because her boundary prevented everybody else from returning to normal. This was not about just Tina and Teddy as individual cheating. Tina was expected to forgive him. This is a whole system. She decides that she's leaving. That's when people start calling her bitter and hard and unforgiving and unhealed. But maybe she's not disrupting the family. Maybe she refuses to keep stabilizing a system that was destabilized by her man's choices. That's the part we have to sit with. A man can break the family system, and the woman can still be blamed for not repairing it fast enough, or softly enough, or spiritually enough, or quietly enough. And that is how the family is a full-fledged system. And the next thing I want to ask and talk about is if God is not a man. Because a lot of people out here saying, I don't see God as a literal man. God is not a man. God is a spirit. Okay, cool. I got a question for you. If God is not a man, why does God keep sounding like one? Because like I said, people have told me and will tell other people, God is not male. They will tell you that God is a spirit and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. They will tell you that God transcends gender. God is beyond human categories. Okay, but I have a question, and it just might be the deepest question in this video. If God is not a man, why does God keep sounding like the men who benefit from God being a man? Why is the God of the Bible called he and father and king and Lord and master and bridegroom? Why is the God of the Bible not called she and mother and queen and bride? And why does God's orders so often place men in charge? Why does God's voice so often instruct women to remain available? Why does God's forgiveness so often reduce consequences for men? Why does God's design so often resemble the social order men already wanted? Why does God need women to endure what men are rarely, never expected to endure? Why is male leadership treated as sacred when female resistance is treated as rebellion? Why y'all just starting to let women in the pulpit for real, for real? Why are the traits that we assign to God so heavily associated with patriarchal power? Command, rule, judge, punish, conqueror, discipline, demands loyalty. But God isn't a man? Okay, then what does Google Images have to say? Because Google Images is one of the quickest ways to see how a culture pictures something. It's not perfect. It's shaped by algorithms and search history and region and what has been uploaded the most. But that's kind of the point. It shows us dominant imagination. So let's right now search God. Look at this. Man, old man, white man, beard, throne, clouds, hands reaching, more beard, more throne, more white man. And I know some of y'all are watching this saying, nah, that's not me. I don't see God as a man. And maybe you don't. But let me introduce a little concept to you called the false uniqueness effect. And that is the tendency to believe that our better qualities are more rare than they actually are. That we are less prone to bias, conditioning and contradiction, or self-deception than the average person. Basically, it's the part of us that says other people are influenced by culture. Other people are shaped by language. It's other people who confuse God with patriarchy. Other women stay too long. Other women forgive too much. But me, I know better. I would have saw it clearly. I would have left his ass the first time. And listen, maybe you would. Maybe you never get got. Maybe you always peep game. But the false uniqueness effect is useful here because it reminds us that we often recognize conditioning in everybody else except ourselves. So before you rush to say, that ain't me, I ask that you slow down and you remember that this channel is about us thinking about our thoughts. And the question is not only do I consciously believe that God is a man? The question is, when I imagine authority, whose voice do I hear? When I imagine protection, what gender does it have? When I imagine God's disappointment, whose disappointment does it feel like? And when I imagine obedience, what body position does that put me in? When I imagine leaving, why might it feel like a rebellion? And that is where the real audit begins. You might don't think that you see God as a man, but the cultural imagination said, yes, you do. Or at minimum, it's the image that you've been swimming in. I'm gonna ask you this. If you remove masculinity and patriarchy, even that hierarchy that comes with those things, if you remove punishment and obedience from your image of God, would you still recognize God? Or would you feel like God had almost disappeared in a sense? And if any part of you can say yes, I want to offer that perhaps what disappeared was never God. Perhaps it was the man you were taught to call God. Now, in cultural autopsies, I sometimes like to ask, what is feeding what? When we get beneath this surface of the water, into the 90% of the iceberg that we can't see. And one of the things in this conversation about God, I'm using Tina and Teddy as a live wire, meaning recognizable figures to have this conversation. Because honestly, if I don't use recognizable figures in these conversations, people don't really watch the videos. But in this conversation, what is feeding what is one thing is male betrayal. So the man betrays the woman is feeding immediate female spiritual labor. And that feeds divine interpretation. And that feeds male restoration. So a man betrays the relationship and the woman is understandably devastated. But very quickly, the attention shifts toward what the woman got to do non-spiritually. She got to pray. She got to seek God. She got to forgive. She got to examine herself. She got to keep the family together. She got to protect these children. She got to listen for divine instruction. She also got to avoid trying to embarrass this man publicly. She got to leave room for redemption. And she got to believe that God will change him. Growing up in the church, I can't tell you how many women be sitting in church believing that God going to change a man, restore a marriage, bring a man to propose. If the man seems not to want to commit, God is going to change a man. The man committed the act and the woman receives the assignment. And then God becomes almost the supervisor of the assignment. And that's really the part I want us to see. The woman is not only asking, what do I want? She also, even in Tina Campbell's case, is asking, what does God require? I've heard her talk about this. What does God allow? What does God restore? She wanted to know many times, what does God want me to forgive? What does God want me to endure? So even their own pain has to pass through this higher authority before they feel permitted to trust their own pain. And I recently had, unrelated to infidelity, had a personal experience that taught me just how much the system of religion teaches us not to know what truth feels like inside our bodies. Because it wasn't until I felt truth that I realized, damn, I never felt truth. That is one of the most important things that's happening here. The wrongdoing is his, and then the restoration work becomes hers. Like, he might go to counseling, he might confess, he might apologize, and he might even become more transparent. But the emotional and spiritual atmosphere of the entire household is placed in the woman's hands. Will she forgive? Will she remain soft? Is she going to keep praying? Maybe you're going through this so God could use you. Is she even going to stop bringing it up? Because when you forgive somebody, you can't bring the shit up that they did apparently. That's a measure of forgiveness. Do you still bring it up? And if you still bring it up, have you really forgiven? Will she allow the marriage to heal? Now, all of a sudden, it's placed on her as if she is the responsible party for the whole healing of the marriage. Some may see that as she holds the strings, that she controls it all. But I don't. What's really happening is a man created a womb, and a woman is evaluated according to how beautifully she heals from the womb. And God forbid she heal in the way that removes him from her life. People get real uncomfortable then. So it's not really control. Control does not penalize like that. Control is benign. And this ain't that. This punishes depending on what choices she made. Most religious communities believe in redemption more strongly when redemption preserves the existing structure, because family is a system. And the goal of family is to keep family together. The goal of a car is to keep a car running. The goal of the digestive system is to keep digestion going. The goal of the system is never for the system to stop working. It is why people say racism is working according to plan as a system. And most religious communities believe that redemption is more strong when redemption preserves the existing structure, not when a woman says, I'm out of here. When she stays, again, Tina was expected to stay because the family is a system. Even if she wasn't thinking, the family is a system, I'm expected to stay. So the husband gets to remain a husband, the family remains together, and the church avoids scandal. And the testimony gets this satisfying ending, and everybody get to say that God did it. If her healing leads her out of the marriage, people have to face the possibility that restoration might mean restoring the woman to herself. That's why when these women be divorcing these men, they cut that hair off. And a woman who cuts her hair just created a new self. Tina hair already short. I don't know. I watch hair on black women. When these women leave these marriages, they come back to themselves. And they may be meeting themselves for the first time because they went from being owned by their daddy to being owned by the man. So this post-divorce may very well be the first time they've met themselves. And I'm of the age where the maiden names are coming back. But baby, the maiden names are coming back. And some people are far less interested in that miracle. That is not a neutral choice. And here's the thing. When women choose to leave, I bet you them women who left, there was other women who secretly, softly told them, I wish I had your guts. I wish I had your courage. Because I'm curious. I know this question might make people uncomfortable. But I'm often wondering how y'all know God told y'all that. Whatever the thing is that you're claiming that God told you. How you know God told you that? And I know that question can feel disrespectful, but it's not. I'm not asking because I think God can't speak. Because God definitely speaks. I'm asking because so many people have been trained to hear God through male authority. Through pastors and husbands and fathers and scripture interpreted by men. And these church traditions that protected men and the images of God shaped by men. So when people, including women, they say, God told me to stay. I'm not automatically saying she's wrong. I'm asking, how many voices did that message pass through before it sounded like God? Did you allow yourself to hear all that is possible or just the things you expected your understanding of God to say? And I'm not being sarcastic. It's just that I seldom hear people who have a certain understanding of God hear God say anything outside of that understanding. Like I tell my mama all the time, it's very interesting that God never tells you things that you don't want to hear. It is very interesting, Patricia, that God don't never tell you things that you don't want to hear. I have never heard you say God told you something that you didn't want to hear. Like, for example, if you believe in long suffering or not tearing a black man down, would you even hear God say leave his ass? I'm not trying to be rude. So like I said, how do you know God told you that? Did God tell you? Because what I'm really asking you is, did your pastor tell you that? Did your husband tell you that? Did fear tell you that? Did your childhood tell you that? Did the version of womanhood you inherited from an unhealed mother or grandmother tell you that? Did the church mothers tell you that? Like, who told you that? Who told you that? Did your desire to avoid shame tell you that? Because I'm wondering if the belief that divorce means failure told you that. Did your need for all of this pain to mean something tell you that? Because, a lot of times we go through things and the pain has to have meaning for us in order for it to feel valid. I have watched countless women in my life say that God told them a myriad of things. God told me to stay. God told me to wait. God told me to submit. God told me not to give up on him. God told me that this marriage is under attack. God told me my husband was going to change. And I'm not saying God didn't tell nobody nothing. I'm just wondering why God's instructions to women so often preserve men's access. Why does God so often tell the woman to remain? Why does God tell her to be patient? Why does God always tell her to soften to him and to forgive him? And not always. Let me not use that language because I know a lot of women who have left that man. I say all the time, majority of the weddings I've been to are now currently in divorce because the woman has left the man. But there are even ways in which she left him that was very much so maintaining his image, not embarrassing him. A lot of times people cut off friends who question the relationship. God told you to cut that person off. Oh, you just didn't want to have to face the questions they was asking you because it really was going to make you have to interrogate the whole relationship. I just want to understand. At some point, we have to ask whether God keeps saying this stuff or whether patriarchy has become like a ventriloquist. Somebody out there going to say, God told me to leave his ass and I ain't feel no ways tired. This is about those who experience what I'm discussing, not those of you out here with a false uniqueness effect. Men have spent generations positioning themselves between women and God. Men translated the scriptures. They used to control like the formal theological education. Men occupied the pulpit only for a very long time. They got to define the doctrine, which books became authoritative. I don't think one woman contributed to determining what books became the 66 books in the Bible. Men decided what heresy was. They put them women on the stakes. They announced that God was male. And we supposed to treat the hierarchy, that comes from that as spiritually neutral, I call cap. And I would be remiss if I didn't make this culturally specific, because we are talking about Tina Campbell, a black woman, a gospel singer, a woman who knows the Lord for herself. Tina Campbell is a staple in black Christian culture. When we think of Tina Campbell, we think gospel music. When we think gospel music, we think the black church. And the black church has been a lot of things to a lot of people. It has been a site of survival, political organization, music, community, resistance, safety. The black church has been literal meaning to many people, and it has been debatable liberation. It also has reproduced patriarchy. Both are true. And black women have often carried the entire institution. Black women are the singers, they usher, they cook, they teach, they organize, they raise the money, they care for the children. Black women support the pastor. Black women pray for everybody in the church. Black women literally hold families together. I look at black women in the church as performing emotional triage all week long. And then they still show up on Sundays looking like God has been nothing but good to them. Matter of fact, the more you cannot look like what you've been through, the more successful you are as a black person, especially a black woman in the church. Their labor keeps the church alive, but they have not been allowed to shepherd the church until relatively recently. Leadership, authority, and theological legitimacy have often remained male, despite the fact that black women carry the church. Black men, they get positioned as the head of the church. And I don't believe that that arrangement came out of nowhere. Yes, we live in a country that is committed to humiliating black men, that strips them of authority, that denies their manhood, that criminalizes them and calls them everything but human. And I do understand fully that the black church became one of the few places where a black man could be called reverend and deacon and bishop and leader and sir. And that matters. I do believe that the restoration of black male dignity mattered. And sometimes in protecting black men from the violence of white supremacy, black institutions began protecting individual black men from accountability inside the community. Talk to a black woman elder who was part of civil rights movements about intra-community violence. Because those not the same thing. Protecting black men from white supremacy is not the same thing as protecting them from accountability inside the community. Protecting black men from racism is not the same as protecting black men from the consequences of harming black women. But those things get collapsed all the time. A black woman tells the truth about what a black man did, and suddenly she is tearing down a black man. I have a scarlet letter on my back from Holly Grove to this day because I reported 3 total boys of sexual assault. And to this day, they call me Shoni, the girl who called rape on Kenneth and Jesse. I never called rape on Kenneth and Jesse, but I did take my mother and me voluntarily took their asses to court for sexual assault. I told the truth about what black boys did, and suddenly I was tearing these black boys down. Their mama stopped talking to me. I got a scarlet letter on my back. Black women helped put the scarlet letter on my back. And when it comes to marriage and divorce, Tina leaves, and next thing you know, that many people will say she abandoned Teddy. She names the betrayal publicly, and she embarrassed the community. And you insist on consequences as a black woman, all of a sudden, you are helping the world destroy another black man. So then his racial vulnerability becomes another reason that a black woman is expected to carry more, is expected to carry more patience and more understanding. And the bullshit is that she's expected to carry more secrecy. She's expected to be more fervent in her prayer, more forgiveness, more labor, more silence. And now she is not only being asked to save the marriage, she is being asked to protect black manhood. Make it make sense. Because black womanhood has often been defined through exactly that kind of carrying. The praying grandma, the faithful wife, the mama who never gave up, the woman who held the family down, the wife who prayed her husband through addiction. Oh, know a lot of them. The woman who forgave infidelity, the woman who stayed until God changed that man. There are women out here who make sure that the world never sees their man the way she got to see him at home. Child, black women suffering get turned into a whole spiritual gift. Hey, let's set the church aside for a while. Have you ever noticed who is more likely to be the one standing outside those metal gates to pick up a black man once he's done with his jail or prison sentence? It's likely a woman. Black women are the bedrock to all things hard when it comes to black communities. Essentially, black women are told they can survive anything, which is not true. But then what happens is that black women's strong stops becoming praise and starts becoming a threat, because strength becomes the reason nobody has to protect her. Strength becomes the reason everybody can ask for just one more sacrifice from her. The reason her breaking point is treated like this spiritual deficiency. And then the church has a tendency to make that suffering feel very holy and divine. Like The church will tell a black woman that your tears are watering a seed. Your marriage is under attack because, girl, it has a purpose. The devil only fights what he fears. Baby, this is crazy. This is crazy. It says your husband got a calling on his life. God is using you to intercede for him. Your children need to see you fight for the family. Keep going. Your obedience is going to be rewarded. Do you see how quickly a man's behavior becomes a woman's ministry? He cheats, she prays, he lies, she fasts. He creates a whole rupture, and she is assigned the restoration. You know what else? There's y'all remember in Love Jones when Nina Mosley told Marvin, all we have, Marvin, is all these years, and that's just not enough anymore. That's what happens when it comes to men, the church, to Tina Campbell, all of this. It's something I'm gonna call sunken cost spirituality. It's when we continue investing in something because we have already invested so much. Like, I've given this marriage 20 years. I prayed so long to leave now, and I forgave too much for this to end in divorce. I told everybody God restored us, and I built this whole ministry around this testimony. Like, a lot of people feel like, but I defended him publicly. And if I leave now, what was all of that for? What was the suffering for? Suffering has to mean something. Because really, that's how people be with the God they serve too. Instead of realizing that who you were told God is, a man who demands your long suffering, who punishes you nonstop, who tests you incessantly, might not actually be God. You keep that God, because if he was good enough for my mama, he was good enough for my grandma, he's good enough for me. Man, religious language can make the sunken costs go on for eternity. That this pain gotta have a purpose. That God would not bring me this far for the marriage to end. The enemy can't have this victory. I can't let my suffering be in vain. Like, it's just all of these religious rhetoric type ideas and notions around I've invested too much to leave. But sometimes the need to make suffering meaningful keeps people suffering. I don't know this lady from a can of paint, but I'm going to say she might not have stayed because her actual day-to-day relationship was healthy. I would be willing to bet that a big part of her staying was because leaving Teddy would force both of them to reinterpret the past. And reinterpretation is terrifying. Maybe what I called obedience was fear. Whoa, people will avoid going that deep. Maybe what I called discernment was actually conditioning. Maybe what I called patience was actually self-abandonment. Maybe what I called God's voice was my terror of failing. Or like maybe the decision was right then and it's not right now. That possibility rarely gets enough room. People want a decision to be either eternally correct or eternally foolish. No nuance, no middle ground. But baby, life moves. People change. Relationships change. Information changes. You can make a decision with integrity and then later make a different decision with integrity. Like, the ending does not always expose the beginning as a lie. It's really a doctrine of redemptive suffering. Christianity is built around a story in which suffering leads to salvation. We got the cross. Jesus sacrificed. Jesus died, Jesus was resurrected, and Jesus' pain was transformed into purpose. I'm not arguing theology here. I'm looking at what happens when that story is applied to women's relationships with men. Suffering can begin to feel spiritually productive. Maybe the betrayal will deepen me. Maybe the marriage is my cross to bear. Girl, God is refining me. Maybe my pain will save the family. My forgiveness might bring this man back to God. It's almost like, I don't know. It's almost like you think you God in a sense. Because, girl, what you think that, girl, you that powerful that your pain is going to bring a man back to God? It's giving a God complex a little. Like, maybe you've been chosen to love him through his brokenness. And now leaving can feel like abandoning the resurrection before it arrives. You are in, like, when Sunday comes, hold on, keep praying. Don't come down from that cross. But sometimes people need to come down from the fucking cross. Sometimes the suffering is not redemptive. Sometimes a man is just benefiting from your belief that pain makes it holy. A theology that can find meaning in suffering may help people survive terrible things. A theology that requires suffering to prove faith can become an instrument of control, and those ain't the same. That spiritual warfare be hiding human accountability, because we got to talk about the devil. When a Christian marriage is in crisis, people be quick to say the marriage is under spiritual attack. The enemy hates marriage. The enemy wants to destroy family. The enemy is attacking my husband. The enemy found an opening. The enemy, pray against that spirit of lust, girl. Pray against division. If I have to hear one more time somebody talk about the devil don't pay attention to things that ain't a threat to his mission, and the mission is to kill, steal, and destroy, I'm going to scream. And look, people can believe in spiritual warfare. But what happens to human accountability when every repeated choice becomes an attack from this invisible enemy? The devil start getting credit for behavior a grown man planned, concealed, and repeated. That man texts, that man lied, he created opportunities, he moved through the world making decisions, but now Satan is his co-defendant. But before we go out here rebuking spirits, my question to people is always, what if the enemy is your inner me? Not the devil, him, you, the inner me. I'm going to just leave it at that. I'm going to wrap this up. Tina Campbell and a slew of other women didn't waste shit. They didn't waste years. People speak as if the only successful marriage is the one that ends in death. She stayed after the betrayal. That's true. That don't mean her forgiveness was fake. It might have been shrouded by all the things I've been talking about in this video because she lived inside the same patriarchal cesspool that we all do. So her decision wasn't like a pure one. She may have either believed her healing was real or maybe she was faking it till she made it. I believe she genuinely loved Teddy. I believe she believed God could heal her marriage, which is not the same as hope that God would heal her marriage. One is possibility and the other one is probability. But at the end of the day, we have to stop using permanence as the only proof that something was real. People can mean their vows and later be unable to continue. People can heal one rupture and encounter another rupture. People can sincerely reconcile and later separate. Because a divorce in 2026 don't tell us what was true in 2016. I think the urge for people to say, see, she should have left back then, that may partly come from our own need for life to be predictable. We want betrayal to contain a permanent warning. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Leave immediately and you're going to be safe. If you stay, you're going to eventually regret it. But baby, human lives are messier than these little slogans y'all got. I do know Teddy Campbell chose to cheat. We got to keep that clear. Tina Campbell chose to remain and attempt to rebuild her marriage. That choice belongs to her. Teddy now has chosen to file for divorce, and respectfully, that choice belongs to him. And everything surrounding those choices has been shaped by a culture, a system, a culture that calls God he, a culture that places men closer to authority, a culture that teaches women to hear God through male voices and then calls them rebellious when their own voices disagree. So like I've been saying this whole video, maybe you do struggle with God because you struggle with men. Maybe trusting God is difficult because every version of authority you've ever known demanded trust without accountability. And maybe surrender very much so feels dangerous because surrendering to men cost you yourself. Maybe we not rejecting God. Maybe we rejecting the emotional architecture of manhood that was handed to us and called divine. So maybe the question ain't actually whether you believe in God or not. Maybe it's who taught you what God was like. Who benefited from that description? What did that God require you to tolerate? Whose voice did that God use? Whose behaviors did that God excuse? And whose power does that God protect? And when you say God told me, how certain are you that a man is not still speaking? I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Tina Campbell, Teddy Campbell, infidelity, forgiveness, restoration, divorce, and the way our experiences with men may shape what we believe about God. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this video made you pause and you want more dissections like this, check out the whole Cultural Autopsy playlist. Pick your next rabbit hole. Go down all the rabbit holes you want to go down. I'm the Ignant Intellectual. Audit your thoughts. Stay brilliant. And for God's sake, question God. And remember, you ain't got to agree with me, but at least know why you think what you think. Peace.